Today, let's take a look at podcast growth. We're going to look at a load of different tactics to turn your podcast from a little shrub into a giant tree. Hey there, it's Colin Gray from thepodcasthost.com. And as I said, today we are talking podcast growth, how to grow your podcast audience. Now, first thing to say is, of course, one of the biggest growth tactics is just to have great content. So if you aren't already there, if you think there's a lot you can do to make your podcast even more appealing, then go and start with that. We've got loads of resources around how to do that on thepodcasthost.com. But if you're there, if you're confident that your content's good, you're not going to be wasting your growth time, all these tactics we're going to talk about, then let's get started. So I've got up to a dozen different ways that you can grow your audience in this video. We're going to look at them all. I'm going to take you through all the techniques, all the tactics, different ways to attract people to your audience. As always, check the description below for every information, for all the links and where to go. But anyway, let's get stuck in. Let's get into podcast growth, see how we can start attracting more people to listen to your show.
So the first point and the most important one is knowing exactly who you want to reach. And this is all part of the podcast planning process, which we'll go into a little bit more in a second. But the whole point is that you can spend a whole lot of time and a whole lot of money trying to reach this certain group of people, but it turns out that it gives you a little bit of an increase for a while, but they drop away because it's not your target audience. You need to know exactly who you want, who you're looking for, what problem you're solving for them, so that you can make sure that you're targeting people that are going to stick and listen to your podcast for the long term. So first, let's think about who and what are your target listeners. You need to think about where they hang out first. Do they use social media? Are they Instagram people, or are they Twitter people? Are they LinkedIn people? Maybe they're not social media folk at all, and maybe actually a community is much better, online or even in real life. This is the stuff you need to find out. Now, we've got loads of resources around planning your audience, around doing your personas, your target audience, your ideal listener. Go and have a look in the description below. And we do have a course, which is our Launch Essentials course, which has a full guide to go through this whole thing. If you do want some extra hand-holding, you'll find a link to the Launch Essentials course below as well. But one place you know you will find your ideal listener is right at the end of your episode. Those people that get to the end of your episode, they've listened to the whole thing, they are your most loyal supporters. They're your biggest fans. And this is where you can hone in on your calls to action. So what do you ask people at the end of the episode? What are those calls to action that will work best to help you promote your podcast? The calls to action are some of the most overlooked or less well used parts of podcasting. There's a couple of things that can happen here. Either you can just waste them by actually using too many calls to action or making them not specific enough or effective enough. Or secondly, you could just not really think enough about the fact that these people who are listening, your existing listeners, like I said, they can be your biggest promoters. They can be the people that can put your podcast out the best, because it's not you telling people that your podcast is great, it's somebody else. Use somebody else's, opinions, enthusiasm to help you grow your show. That's why doing really effective calls to action at the end of your episodes can be one of the best ways to grow your show. Even if you start with just 20 listeners, that's 20 people who are going to go out there and act as promoters for your show if you do calls to action right. So one of the classics here is to ask for a review. So reviews can be valuable, but we'll talk about more about them later on in this video actually. We'll talk about reviews and how they can work, but often they're not the most effective way to use that call to action. One of the best ways to start, actually, is test this out, is just to ask your audience to share it with one or two people and get really specific about it as well. Say something like, so thank you for listening to the show. If you've enjoyed this content, if you've got some value from it, please do us one little favor that really helps us grow this and make it better for you as well. That is, go and find one person that you know that likes the same kind of stuff, that's into this, and share this show with them. Talk them into listening. If it takes it, open their podcast app on their phone and find the show for them. We'd really appreciate that help. That's quite a kind of long, specific ask. But as soon as you get specific, as soon as you get descriptive, as soon as you kind of try and play on that reciprocity, as in, if you've got value from this, please do one thing to help us in return, because you're doing this for free, generally. then that can often work wonders. And that can turn 100 loyal listeners into 1,000 because every one of those 100 goes out and promotes it to other people. You can gamify this in a really nice way by saying, if you want to mention this on your social channels, then link us. So do an @thepodcasthost and we'll share it out. We'll talk to those people you're trying to persuade to listen to the show. There's a couple of things that happens here. Firstly, those recommendations go more widely because they get on your fans' social channels. Secondly, those people that it reaches are more likely to listen because you, as the host, are actually engaging with those people as well. You're adding your own clout to that and showing that you're a real human behind the podcast. So these things can work really well if you put it out there and you can help. And of course, the third part is that fan that puts out the promotion, they get to interact with you. You show that you care. You show that you're actually, it makes a difference, that they're sharing this thing with their audience. So that kind of gamification can be really effective for encouraging people to grow your show for you. Final note on this, if you're asking people to share your show, to promote it for you, you want to have a really effective place to send people. We'll talk about that in the next section, about how to make a website for your podcast that's really effective at grabbing in listeners and persuading them to listen. That's it's one thing that people really miss actually, is that home page, that home base. Don't send people to iTunes. You want to send them to your home base where you control and you can really persuade people to listen. We'll go into that in the next section. Before we jump into that, let's do audience surveys quickly because it's really relevant here actually in a few ways. You already know that audience surveys are great for improving your show, making better content. All of that is great for promotion, growing your audience. If you don't have a good show, then it's not going to grow. So you ask, what do you like? What do you not like? What do you want more of? What topics do you want us to cover next? So ask those things. But importantly, in that survey, ask your audience, where did you find us? Where did you find us on the web or out there in the world? And as soon as you can get an idea of where your first 20 listeners, 50 listeners, 100 listeners have found you, then you can know where to look, where to focus your efforts to find more people like them. If you find one social media that's mentioned a lot, that's the one you focus on. If you find one community that's mentioned a lot, you focus in on there as well and find other communities like that. That data, how did you find us, is really, really valuable. Really worth doing a survey for that on its own. Now, if you want more on this, about how to use audience surveys, we've got a great article on it on thepodcasthost.com. Just go into the description and you'll find it listed there as how to grow your audience with surveys.
One of the biggest things that podcasters miss in growth is their website. It's the home base for their podcast. It's a place you need to be able to send people that persuades them to listen. And that's all about, what the show's about showing that problem, solution, why you're unique, and really persuading them to listen. And that's about a few different things that are involved in that website. So let's go through everything that you should be including. Now, the front page should tell a little bit about your podcast. Show the artwork, show the title, and a little description. It should also show subscribe buttons for the big players. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Pods, maybe just your RSS feed as well, so people can use that elsewhere. And then it should show contact. So if people want to get in touch to sponsor you or to send you some feedback or something like that, have a contact form on there too. Now, equally, your website should probably have, if you can, a separate page for each of those. So a bigger about page, showing a bit of the backstory, why you do what you do, really a bit more about you and about the topics that you cover. Again, a contact page that people can go to and see, social links, maybe an email form, that kind of thing. And maybe even a guide on how to subscribe. I'll also mention reviews later. Maybe it's a guide on how to do a review. So that could be the subscribe page as well. A few other things you might want to include, maybe your media kit. So if you are looking for sponsorship for advertisers, have a media kit on your website so that they can easily see your stats, your offerings, all of that stuff. Then maybe some social subscribe buttons as well. Do you get out on Twitter? Do you get out on Instagram, Reddit, wherever it is you are? Show people how to find you in those locations. Then something associated with the website is the domain, the address. Do you have a short, snappy, memorable domain for it? We have podcraft.net for our podcast about podcasting. It's hosted on thepodcasthost.com, our big website, but we still have a separate domain that redirects to that just for the podcast so that you can see it on the podcast. Go to podcraft.net to see more, to see the show notes, that kind of thing. So a domain is really important as well. Something nice, short, snappy, and descriptive. And the final one, a great little trailer for your podcast. So if you can create this in video, excellent, but it doesn't need to be. It could just be an audio. It could be a minute, which just tells the story of what your podcast is about and really tries to draw your listeners in. We've got loads of guides on how to create a great trailer for your podcast because that's an art in itself. So have a look in the description below to see our guide on how to create a great trailer for your podcast. But if you can embed that on your website, then as soon as somebody hits that front page, they see that at the top, they've got a 1-minute thing they can listen to that really will draw them in, give them a great idea of what your podcast is all about. Now, when thinking about making this website and creating the content on it, we're also thinking about SEO and Google search because you will be found, your podcast will be found in all the podcast directories like Apple Pods, Spotify, but a great way to be found and a real benefit of having a good website for your podcast is the fact that you can then show up in text search. Somebody types in a question like, what's the best mic for a podcast? And then our podcast will show up under text search because we have articles and a good website for that podcast. So let's start thinking about SEO and how we think about how to make that good for a podcast website. Now, one tip, if you're using WordPress, the Yoast SEO plugin is great for this. It'll help you create your show notes and everything in a way that really helps you show up in Google search. It gives you tons of tips while you're creating that post on what you can do to make it great. The other is all about the episode titles for your episode. So let's dig into that. Now, this is another thing that podcasters often get wrong. The big thing with your episode titles is that that's kind of your billboard. That's your persuasion. That's how you persuade somebody to listen to an episode or your podcast in general. If somebody's browsing through Apple Pods or Spotify, they'll see the title, they might get intrigued by that, but the next thing they'll do is they'll have a look at your episodes. They'll have a look at the topics and they might pick one to listen to before they subscribe. So those episode titles are key in really drawing people in. Now, the thing is, a lot of podcasters will waste the episode title space. They'll type in episode 6 dash something, something, something. Now, that episode 6 is completely unnecessary. That is not achieving that aim of drawing in a listener. So get rid of that altogether. Next, quite often, if you're an interview show in particular, you might put the name of the person you're interviewing. Now, unless you're interviewing somebody really, really famous, I'd argue that the name should not come up first. I think what should come up first all the time is the problem you're solving or the question you're answering or the value or the benefit that you're offering. So if we're doing what's the best microphone for podcasting, that's what goes up front. You could put the name of the person after. So maybe it's what's the best microphone for podcasting with Matthew McLean, for example, and then episode 6 at the end if you really want to put it in there. But make sure those episode titles are really showing what help or what value or what benefit that episode is going to give to your listener. Now, that helps draw them in the directories. But equally on the website, we're talking about the website here, it means that when somebody hits that website, they're going to scroll through and they're going to see all of those articles titled in this way, and they're going to go in there and then they're going to see the player and listen. So the episode title works both on your website, but also in the directories out there in the world. If you want to see some examples of this, go and check out our pocket-sized podcasting podcast, which has got all really descriptive titles for every single episode. You can see a link for that in the show notes below. Now let's dig into the show notes themselves, because this is a really important part too. We've got the episode title down, we've got the website looking great, but what show notes do you want to put in on this website to really make it effective for capturing listeners, for making your existing listeners much more loyal? Well, for me, actually the ideal is to write what really amounts to a blog post to go along with every podcast episode. This can start with a transcript. So if you use Alitu, for example, our own podcast maker app, Alitu offers transcripts for every single episode you create. So download that transcript from Alitu, go into it. You could post that transcript on its own as the show notes. It's not ideal. Transcripts tend to be quite long, quite wordy. We don't quite write the way we speak, but it can be a base. You can take that transcript and you can edit it down so that it sounds and comes across great as a written resource. So that could be a base for it. Really, the blog post wants to summarize what you talked about in the podcast. It wants to cover the same topic. It wants to be something that people can go back to and review. They can, if they've listened to the episode, they can go and have a look at it to really review what was in there, to see the resources you mentioned, maybe have some time codes in there that say, like, if you want to listen to this bit, go to minute 320. If you want to listen to this bit, go to minute 1040. That kind of stuff goes great in show notes. You want to make them really valuable so that they stand alone. And if that's the case, Google will start to rank them in text search as well. And it's such a good way to get found because people will find that written article, they'll see your player in there, they'll press play, and they'll listen to your podcast. Now, we've got a full guide to writing great show notes on thepodcasthost.com. So again, go to the description below and you'll find a link for it right there. When we ran our Podcaster Cares survey last year, you can see the results in the description, go for the link there. 40% of podcasters said that they thought every serious podcaster should run an email list. Now, there's no need to get defensive about this if you don't. If you're not into email, if you're not a great writer, you just don't enjoy writing, better not to do it at all than to make a half-assed job of it. But if you can do it well, if you're into it, then it can be a really, really good way to engage with your audience and really encourage repeat listens, maybe even reach new people as well. The thing is, email is more push than podcasting. It means that you can land in people's inboxes and it's an easier way to keep in touch with people. Now, I know you already do this in your podcast episodes, but email is just a different way to keep in touch that can really help people come back, find your content again, or crucially, actually see your calls to action much more easily. Because that is where podcasting, as you know very well, is one place that it falls down a little. People are out and about, they're driving, walking the dog, washing the dishes. You ask them to do something, they'll go, I'll do that. But then they'll forget by the time they actually get back to the computer. But when they're in their email, they see you, they remember the value you've given them, and then they see the call to action right there and then. So you can use email to send out show notes, really give more value to your listeners, grow that loyalty. You can send out the offers you've said. You can send out links to the resources, the products, anything, that you want them to go and check out via that email. It's a great way to build that relationship, to give them more, but also to direct them to the places you want them to go to achieve the goals you have for your podcast as well. And plus, it's an easy thing for people to share. If you send an email with all that value in it, then they can share that with their friends, with other people that like the same content. So it's a really nice shareable medium as well. Now, we've got a big guide to email marketing for podcasters on thepodcasthost.com. So pop down into the description and you'll find the link for it right there. So you can go old school, just go traditional and just go pure advertising to try and promote your podcast. It can be an effective way to do it if you've got a budget to get that audience in quick, and there's a few ways to do it. So one of the most effective we've found is actually in the listening apps themselves. You've got listening apps like Overcast, like Pocket Casts, and a few others out there that allow you to advertise directly in the app. You pay, you choose a category, you choose a type of podcast, and then a little banner appears at the bottom of the listening app when a listener's in there. This is particularly effective because when a listener is in there searching for a type of podcast and your podcast pops up, they're obviously looking for something new to listen to. They're looking for something in that category, and then your podcast pops up right in front of their face. So they're there, ready and waiting, so it can convert quite well. But obviously the downside is you need some budget. This does cost money. It's not super cheap, but it's also not horribly expensive too. So maybe it could suit your context. Now, if you've got a lower budget, but still a little bit to spend on this, social media advertising can be quite effective. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, they all offer advertising products where you can target particular groups of people. So you can find people that like the topic that you're into. So for my mountain biking podcast, for example, I can find people who like mountain biking, people who are part of this mountain biking group, that mountain biking group, and advertise to them specifically. And with the social media platforms, you tend to be able to set a budget, and it can start quite low. So you can even just spend $2, $3 a day or even less on that advertising. And that can be quite effective because people are in there, they're browsing that topic anyway, potentially, and then your podcast can pop up in front of them. The conversions may be slightly lower than the listening app because some of these people might not listen to podcasts. But then again, you could target that as well. You could target people who have liked another podcast in my space, or people who have said they're interested in podcasts and also like my topic. So the social media platforms are really clever in how you can target people, really niche down to folk that you think are definitely likely to listen. Another way to leverage social media in this way, again, if you've got a bit of budget, is through groups and communities. A lot of these groups and communities that run little topics actually quite happily take sponsorship or advertising, and it helps support the activity of that group. And generally, if you've got the right product, it's actually quite interesting to that group. So it's not like advertising to them and advertising that nobody wants to see. If your podcast is about something that they're interested in, it's actually a good thing to get it in front of them. And quite often the budget for these is quite low if the group is, an average size or just a kind of niche topic. So get in touch with the owner, and then the way this works is that owner will help you promote. And often the trust that they have built by running this group transfers over to you. So it can be quite an effective way to put your podcast in front of people because that owner of the group or even the moderators will then help you to promote the podcast within the group and sponsor it for a few weeks or a month or longer. And then just a final note, you can use these with no budget at all. I mean, you can't really advertise directly if you're not paying for it. But if you get into these groups and you start giving value, you start offering, good tips, good conversation, you become a valuable member of the community or of a group, then you start to be able to actually advertise in a more subtle way, as in, here's the new episode I just posted. I thought you might be interested because of this, this, and this that I talk about. And of course, because your podcast is not a paid thing, because it's free, you can get away with that more often, especially if you've built a bit of value, in the past by offering up, help and support elsewhere in the group.
Podcast reviews, how can you use them to grow your audience? I mean, in the first place, great reviews are really good material to grow your audience for a few different reasons. Firstly, they appear in the listening apps. So if you can get a whole bunch of reviews in Apple Pods, for example, they appear pretty prominently. There's nothing like seeing, 5 stars and 32 reviews at the top to kind of encourage somebody to listen to your show. But equally, you can actually put them elsewhere too. So you can get reviews and you can put them on your website. You get widgets that can bring in reviews and put them onto your home-based website. It really shows that social proof. It's somebody else telling the potential listener that your show's great rather than you doing it. It's much more believable. So that's one great way to do it as well. And we have even done it with merch in the past too. We've put reviews onto beer mats that you can put around an event or something like that, or on t-shirts. You put 5 stars in a review, just a really quick one on your t-shirt. It's a really nice way to promote your show without potentially having to do it all yourself. The funny thing is as well, bad reviews can actually be quite good material as well. We've had quite a few kind of, almost funny bad reviews. You get a 1 star and it's something that's just a little bit of a Mickey take. And you could put them onto it. Matthew, with his show, A Scottish Podcast, used bad reviews on beer minutes. All his 1-star reviews he put on there, but quite funny ones. And that was a really clever way to promote that show. And it came across really well. The final way you can share them is on social media. So if you do use social media, if you know your audience hangs out there, you can share reviews there. Share reviews that you've had on any of the platforms, on your website, people that have called in and given you quotes, any of that kind of thing. If you've got audio or video, you can put that onto social media really well. If you've got those kind of testimonials, but equally text works quite well as well. Just popping it on Twitter, on Instagram, stuff like that. It's a good place to pop those reviews to really showcase how people like your show. Now, how to get more reviews? Well, it's all about asking and making it easy for people to give those reviews. So we've mentioned calls to action earlier in this video. I mentioned at the time that reviews are not necessarily the most impactful way to grow your show, but you can do a campaign. If you make it specific, again, I've always said, keep it specific. If your calls to action are really specific, they work really well. So you can say, we're spending a month just trying to get some more reviews for our show to really help us showcase why people like what we do and get it out there to more people so that we can grow our audience, which gives us more time, more space to create better content for you as a listener. Try and create that two-way benefit for the listener, give that review that helps you do more for them in future. So that's something that you can do to get those more reviews. And if you make a campaign of it, you say, right, just through the month of August, we're going to try and get as many reviews as we can. And maybe you offer some bonuses. If we can get to 100 reviews, then we do this extra thing. It's like a Patreon or something like that. Those stretch goals. We have 50 reviews, we'll do this on the podcast. If we do 100, we'll complete this challenge. You can do anything from special content that you wouldn't make otherwise to silly things like I'll shave my head or, something silly that makes the audience really get into it. That's really cool. Another way to encourage them is to read them out. So people that listen to your show love to get a mention. So if you say through the month of August during our review campaign, we're going to read out 2 or 3 reviews and thank you on the show. We'll give you a mention. We'll mention your podcast or we'll mention your thing that you do related to the topic that I talk about. It's a really nice way to encourage more reviews as well. And the final one that I mentioned is making it easy for people to actually give this review. So I've seen people do this really well, where they'll put a guide on their website on how to give a review. There's a little video, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, that just showcases how you go into Apple Pods, how you go into Spotify, how you go into any platform and actually give that review. And you can direct people to that website, to that video, to really show them how to do it, make it super easy for them. So that's podcast reviews. Can be a really good way to grow your show. Don't do it all the time, but if you're going to run a little campaign, make it nice and specific. It can be a really good way to grab them in. And then as long as you use them well by sharing them elsewhere to really showcase why people like your show.
One really nice growth technique is actually collaborating with others in your niche. So finding other podcasters, other content creators, other video creators, anyone really that creates content of any sort for the same target audience as you. So if you go and write up a list, go out there and search, you probably know this already because you'll be following this space, you'll be interested. So create a list of 10, 15, 20 of those people and start reaching out. Now, what can you do with them? Well, there's a few different things you might want to do. First of which is maybe just a promo swap. So you could say on your podcast, go and check out this other podcast I just found on mountain biking. They cover it in this different way. Go and have a listen. And then they'll do the same on yours. If it's a different type of content, maybe a blog will give you a little written ad in their posts about your podcast and you can direct people to that blog. Similar with video. Maybe the person on the YouTube channel will mention your podcast. You can mention that YouTube channel as another great resource. The other great thing to do is to actually create something together. Maybe that's something like a resource, like a little ebook or a checklist or something that you can give away to your audience that you create in parallel and therefore is a kind of co-promotion tool from then going onwards. You can expand that out into maybe emailing your email lists. So you email your list about it all, they email theirs. And again, there's a lot of cross promotion there where you can share audience and grow together. There's a great way if you have another podcast, you can actually co-host an episode, create an episode together. I'll talk a bit more about that in the next section about creating content together, but that's a nice way to go ahead too. A final one to mention here is a classic, the montage episode. And it's classic because it's actually really effective and not that hard to do. If you can find 5 or 10 people in your niche, again, it doesn't even need to be all podcasters, can be bloggers, YouTubers, other content creators, then you can create a montage episode between you all. All you need to do is send them out 1, 2, maybe 3 questions at most, and then share that with them, ask them to send an answer in, and then create an episode which just shows their answers to that question. For example, a writing podcast might say, what's your tips for overcoming writer's block? And then the end result is 10 people all giving their tips on overcoming writer's block. You've got an episode title, 10 expert writers give ultimate tips on overcoming writer's block, something like that. That can be a really nice thing to create. It's a great bit of content, but equally it's a great thing that will get shared out as well because everyone involved is likely to share it with their audience and it's something special that stands out, which means your listeners are more likely to share it too and more likely to come back for future content.
Now, one great tactic to grow your show is creating content for other people or even with other people. So how does that work? Well, we go back to one of the classic methods for growing even just a website or a YouTube channel, whatever it might be, and that is guest posting. It still works really well, especially if you're in a niche topic. So if you write something really specific, you're writing about wooden boats or you're writing about left-handed crocheting or something like that, there will be websites out there, there will be communities out there, there'll be all sorts of places out there that will accept content. You write up, you offer to write an article for them, and then you get that posted. That gets in front of their audience. It gets you some traffic towards your website, towards your podcast, which then grows your audience. Now, this can work for podcasting and video as well. You could create a guest podcast clip, 5 or 10 minutes, just showcasing something that you send to a content creator. Similar with a video, a 2-3 minute clip that showcases something that you know or a skill you have or anything related to that topic. Us as content creators, we always have weeks where you're struggling to find the time to make something or to come up with an idea. So if somebody sends you something good, a podcast clip, a guest post, a video clip, then, it stops you having to start from a blank canvas. And as long as it's good quality, as long as there's a good picture around it, you're likely to use it. So you create that, you put it out there, and people will include it in their content. The other way I like as well, I mentioned content for people, but with people as well. Set up a collaboration where you do a co-hosted episode. So you're actually creating some content. You suggest to somebody, would you like to co-host an episode with me on, for example, with us, it might be something around growing a podcast. So I would go to another podcast about podcasting and say, would you like to co-host this? And then me and another host would actually jointly host this episode, and we'd put that episode on both of our feeds. And that gets me in front of their audience and them in front of ours. That's a really good exchange that helps both sides to grow. Now, one little tip here, a type of content that in my experience gets picked up, gets grown, gets shared really, really well is gear or software or tools or services, reviews of them and guides how to use them. So for us, for example, it's microphones and mixers. If we do anything around that, people love it. People pick it up, people share it, they send it out there, and people will include it in their own content as well. Equally, something like software, so podcast hosting platforms, recording tools, that type of stuff for us. Maybe if you're a cooking show, it's like a new set of pots and pans or a whisk or something like that. And the even better thing about this is that if you do use that gear, often you can get other content creators to use it or share it. But equally, the person you're reviewing, the software, the tool, the brand, they'll share it out as well. So if I mention a Rode microphone and share that out, then Rode themselves might share it with their audience, who are all audio professionals, audio creators that will enjoy that content as well. So think about whether you can do gear, software, tools, anything like that for your audience, and then share that out with as many other people as you can. Now, the final one to mention here is, again, a classic, the podcast interview. Now, anybody who starts a podcast knows that they want to start getting on other people's podcasts. It's one of the most effective ways to grow as well, because you can get in front of an established audience. If you get interviewed, you can showcase what you do, you can talk about your podcast, you can maybe attract some of those listeners to you. It's an easy sell because they already listen to a podcast if it's something similar, so you can maybe draw them over to yours. The thing is, most shows get a lot of proposals, a lot of pitches to get people to come in and interview. So to stand out and to get on good shows, it can be quite tricky. There's a few things you can do. First of which is make sure that you actually listen to that show. So part of your growth tactic, maybe you do this anyway because most of us do, is listening to other shows in your area. So if I'm doing a mountain biking show, I'll listen to as many other mountain biking podcasts as I can. So I'll know that show, I'll know the host, I'll know the kinds of things they talk about, kinds of things they like, they don't like. And then when I contact them, I'll mention that stuff up front. I'll mention a few things that shows that I listen, that I care, that this is not just a generic outreach, which we get tons of. So that makes a big difference. And next, being really specific about the pitch. You'll notice a theme here. I've mentioned this a few times in a few of these sections, being specific. Now, the pitch, you want to say, what is the benefit I'm going to give you? Here are the 1, 2, or 3 really specific things I'm going to talk about to give to your audience that's going to offer a ton of value that's going to make them love this episode. It's going to make it one of your most effective episodes ever. All right? Here's the problem I'm going to solve. Here's the solution I'm going to offer. And here's why my approach is unique. Here's why this has not appeared on any other podcast. That is what's going to draw you in. That's what's going to get you on that show. If you can show that you're going to give something new, you're going to give something actionable, you're going to give something that their audience is really going to love. So that's how you get yourself on to podcast interviews.
Now here's another one if you have a little bit of budget, and that is supporting other content creators through a bit of financial support. So this could be as simple as sponsoring another podcast. Obviously, we've talked about how effective it is to do promo swaps with other podcasts in your niche or work with other podcasters in your niche. Sometimes that could extend to actually just sponsoring that podcast straight up so that that podcast gets a bit of support from you, but they keep mentioning your show and whatever else you do around that as well. It can be a great way to get in front of their audience if you have the budget. Equally, Patreon is a tool that a lot of podcasters use to support their content. And Patreon tiers often include something around mentions. So maybe they've got a standard tier for $5 a month, which is just, support the show. But if you pay $25, you get a mention in every episode as like a podcast donor or a supporter or a partner or whatever. Well, if you can find a few podcasts like that in your niche, then you'll get a mention on their show every single week. It's just a different method of sponsorship going through Patreon. And of course, expand that out more widely. It's not just podcasters that use Patreon. Search on Patreon for your topic and you might find YouTube channels, content creators, writers, all these different types of people covering your topic, maybe even newsletters on Substack, that kind of thing. And then you can maybe find a tier within their support that gets you a mention within their content. Now, one extra thing to think about here is that this doesn't just apply to the digital world. You get local hobby groups, local organizations, you get places where people congregate around your topic in real life or events, things like that. Sometimes these kind of niche events actually don't charge that much for sponsorship tiers. You might be able to go along to, there was a local podcast event that we went to where the sponsorship tiers were about $250 to get on the lanyard. And it was all for podcast listeners. And so we could get in front of those people for just $250. And that was really good because there was maybe 500 or 1,000 people turned up to that. So look out for local events or even national events that are more niche and therefore tend to have sponsorship tiers that are a bit more affordable. And that's where you could use your budget to help get in front of even more people in real life.
One way I love to use video in growing a podcast is in creating short, shareable highlight clips or trailers. Now, short, shareable videos are actually quite easy to create around your podcast if you think about it in the right way. So the first thing you can do is the easiest method is just to create something called an audiogram. So if you take a clip from your podcast, 30 seconds, a minute. Now, one tip here is to get in the habit of paying attention when you're recording to highlight clips. You can get in the habit of this quite easily, just knowing that, that was a really good 1 minute. That was a really good tip I just gave. That was a really concise thing I just said. That was a really funny thing we just did. And just have a pad in front of you, paper and pen, and just note down the time code so that you've got that there, because it saves so much time in going back and reviewing and trying to find them. So once you've got them, you take that clip, you cut out 30 seconds or a minute audio, and you upload it to one of the various tools that can do this. There's free ones out there. Just search audiograms on our website and you'll see a free version. But then you've got Headliner, you've got Wave, and they can take that clip and they can put a picture behind it, they can put a moving wave on it, and they can put a transcript underneath it. So it makes it quite engaging, even though it doesn't have true video on it. But then again, the next step up from that, and not too much more difficult, is to use that head recording that you might have in your call recording app. So if you use something like Squadcast, they might be able to record the video right there. You might have that actual bit of video. Now, I don't usually recommend publishing that whole thing. A whole episode of just two videos on two faces on a call. It's pretty boring. But 30 seconds or a minute of that, which is a highlight clip, a really good bit, a really actionable tip, a really funny part, that can work really well. Again, you might want to put it into something like Headliner or Wave or something like that. They put on the transcript, might put a little bit of style around it, go to flip between the faces, make it really engaging. that kind of video can go down really well, especially on social, on your website, elsewhere, or maybe even on YouTube for short clips. Now, this is a way to compensate potentially for the fact that audio is notoriously hard to make go viral. It's kind of harder to share because it's long, because it's in depth. It's not such a shareable method of content. But these video clips you can share, they could go viral potentially. So much easier to get around there. And then they lead people to your podcast. That's the whole key. Make sure you're linking to your podcast or put the link at the end. Here's how to listen to the full episode. And that can help grow your audience. Now, a final one I'll mention here that we've tried in the past that I think is really good fun, a lot more unique, a little bit more work, potentially more budget though, is to actually create an animation or a cartoon around that clip. So let's say you've got a 1-minute clip, 60 seconds of audio. You can send that to a platform like Fiverr or Upwork or 99 Designs. And places like that, you can find people who can create an animation around this. Now, we've tried this in the past with our show Hostile Worlds, which is an audio drama that teaches about space. We had a clip made around that. I even had an animation made of an interview I did, which was just what I thought was a nice actionable tip. And it was an animation of me talking to the host. And it just looked really good. It was a unique way to use that type of content. And it's not too expensive, especially if you use a platform like Fiverr. So that's one other way you can use video to grow your audience. You can give that a try. It can be a way to really get yourself out there, especially on social media platforms, but elsewhere as well.
Believe it or not, there are ways to promote a podcast, not on digital, but instead in real life. I mentioned a wee bit of this earlier, but let's dig into it a little bit more here. This can stem anything from local groups. You know, if you do a Warhammer podcast, you go along to a local wargaming group and get involved and they can help you promote it. But then it can go up to regional as well. Like that local society might get involved in regional events and therefore you can get yourself out to that event as well. Toastmasters is a really good example of this. Toastmasters is an org where you go along to a local event to learn to speak better. So they could learn about your public speaking podcast, but then you go to regional conferences as well, just for, say, Scotland. And then they can actually promote your content too if you share something good. But equally, they have a national, UK-wide one, and they have an international organisation too. So if you start to get well known within an organisation like that, then you can get your content out nationally amongst them all. So join a club, see where that goes, might work well. Equally, have a look around for conventions, conferences, expos, anything like that that runs in your niche. Now, some of these, especially if it is a small niche, if it's something maybe more hobby, can be quite affordable even to get a booth or a table or showcase something. Or you could even offer to provide a service in exchange for a sponsorship tier. So if you go along and create like a montage episode or you create a podcast that promotes the show in some way, maybe they'll let you advertise for free amongst the event. We've managed to do that before. Equally, that content can then be good content for your audience too, because this conference is obviously going to be around something that they're interested in. So get along there, get to a conference, start grabbing some vox pops, just asking questions around the hall, create that episode that comes from it. And you can either use that at future events to show what you can do to promote that event, to maybe get some more sponsorship, deals or agreements with those future events, or you might even be able to do it at the existing one. Bag yourself a table for free for that little bit of promotion for them. If you do this, make sure you print out some business cards for your podcast. Kind of old school, but those little bits of card, hand them out, especially if you can get them nicely designed, then it works really well. Something like Canva, you can create that merch for free, make some stickers as well, hand them out, anything that you can make it memorable. And if you have business cards, stickers, beer mats, little things like that, budget is not huge and it makes you nice and memorable at that event. And there you have it. That is audience growth for podcasting. As always, have a look in the description below for all the links to take you to every resource that I have mentioned. Loads of articles down there, loads of resources to help you grow your audience. And of course, please do hit that alert button so that you get notifications when new videos come out for our channel. Otherwise, I'll see you on a future video and hopefully we can turn your show into that massive tree that we were talking about.